The next, I'd like to recognize our next member from Florida, Mr. Jimenez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, I heard a story Monday when I was in Miami about an individual that tried to cross and was captured by the cartel, and thinking that everybody in Miami has money, they called his cousin and FaceTime. The cousin didn't have the money, and they basically murdered his cousin on FaceTime because he couldn't give up the $10,000. That's the kind of people that we're dealing with. They have absolutely no value for human life. It's all about profit. Mr. McCraw, have you told has the Biden administration gotten the word of what it is they need to do in order to fix the problem at the border?
They've got a lot of smart people back there. It'd be impossible not to know what's the right thing to do. This is not rocket science.
I agree. And so, do you think the President of the United States is dumb?
I'm not going to comment on that.
Do you think that?
I don't even see it.
Do you think that the Secretary of Homeland Security is dumb?
Certainly, he's not.
Okay.
There's no question.
So the only thing you can come up with is this is done on purpose.
There's no. I can't see it otherwise. It's done on purpose. I don't know that it's meant to be malevolent and to rot the problems it has, but it certainly has.
Well, you'd have to be pretty dumb not to see that what you're doing is malevolent, and it actually has real dire consequences in the United States. So it's actually done on purpose. Yeah. I've come to that conclusion a long time ago. They're actually doing this on purpose.
Yeah,
right?
Whatever the reasons,
why, I don't know.
Yeah, whatever the reasons, because this is not a political issue, it's a public safety issue, and it hurts.
I got it. So now, okay, now that we know that it's on purpose, okay, now let's move on to something else, okay? All right. How many different cartels are there on the southern border?
Well, in Texas, which we focus on, there's 6 Mexican cartels that operate.
Do you have any intelligence on how many members of the cartels have on the border, on the on the Mexican side?
No.
You don't?
No. We've got some estimations in terms of working with DEA along those lines, but exact numbers.
No, not exactly. What's your estimation?
I wouldn't even want to, because the extensions of the cartels, I wouldn't want even to project in terms of how many members, but clearly there's as many members of the cartel than there are in gangs in Texas, and we've identified over 100,000 gang members. So it's
so at least 100,000. You think at least 100,000?
There's going to be, because at some point, and whether they're directly or indirectly cartel members, there's no question they've got an army of people down there. In fact, I mean, we know from past experience, the whole Zeta part were former Mexican military that went over to be the enforcement arm of the cartel. The Gulf cartel moved over, created its own cartel. So you have this continuing, rebranding and splitting of cartels, and they continue to, as we've talked about before, metastasized.
Does the Mexican military have the capacity to deal with these cartels?
They haven't demonstrated the capacity to deal with the cartels.
But do you think they have the capacity?
I don't know. Okay. Because the capacity includes will.
Well, that's my next question. You beat me to the punch, because then do you think they have the will?
Well, I know the government of Mexico does not have the will.
Thank you. I do too. I think the government of Mexico does not have the will. They may have the will if the drugs that are poisoning us were actually poisoning the Mexican people. So I really have starting to have some doubts about where this government of Mexico lies. I mean, is there a deal, a secret alliance, something that says, hey, keep the drugs out of Mexico, okay, and I'll leave you alone. You can go ahead and poison the Americans all you want.
There's no news to the fact that Mexico has had issues with corruption as it relates to the Mexican cartels.
And yet the policies of the Biden administration actually helps the cartels because they're making huge profits off of immigration, right? So these policies actually are helping the cartels grow in power and their ability to kill Americans, and yet the Biden administration knows they're wrong and continues to do it.
Yeah, well, there's clearly at the end of the day, the impact on the cartels is they're richer and more powerful than they were before this mass migration began.
All right, and that is all due to the failed policies of the Biden administration, which we have to assume they know are wrong.
I'm not going to say what they assume. I just know that it's not rocket science to figure this out.
Yeah, it's or brain surgery, actually. I mean, we have a physician
I think
here,
brain
so
surgery is a little complicated, but yes,
Okay.
yes, sir.
I got it. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I yield back.
Thank you. And I recognize our next witness, or our next questioner, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Pfluger.
Thank you, Chairman. I thank all of you for being here, for your service to protect this country and keep it safe. We have had what I would characterize as a groundbreaking testimony today by Chief Ortiz, Chief of the Border Patrol, and he said that he does not believe we have operational control over the southern border. Number two, he does not believe that in at least 5 of the 9 sectors along the southwest border that it is secure, and that we have a policy crisis. And Mr. Cabrera, I'd like you to speak on behalf. How many people do you represent in the National Border Patrol Council?
16,500.
Please speak on behalf of 16,500. Do they believe that we have operational control of our southern border, that it is secure?
Absolutely not.
We've heard a lot today. I appreciate your testimony about the morale. Do you feel, again, speaking on behalf of those 16,500, do they feel supported by the Commander-in-Chief, by Secretary Mayorkas? Do they feel like they have the resources they need to do their job?
Absolutely not.
How sad is that, that you have testified that we have not sufficiently invested in our agents? We hear you. We support you. How sad is it? Do you want a bipartisan solution or just one party supporting you?
Oh, we need a bipartisan solution. This immigration, especially what happens to these women and children along this border, has nothing to do with politics. I mean,
No.
if we lined all these kids up in the room, I'm sure you guys would come up with a solution in a matter of hours.
And how sad is it that our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are not here in McAllen today in the Rio Grande Valley to see those unaccompanied minors, to hear the stories, to talk to you, and to hear you saying that you have a recruiting and a retainment problem, that we had 17 plus suicides last year. It's very sad. Colonel McCraw, thank you for your service. Just about an hour ago, I talked to a family member, the daughter of one of the 3 women who is missing in Mexico, from Benitez, right here in the Rio Grande Valley. Very sad situation. And with that event, with the recent murders of Americans in Mexico, do you see the cartels acting more brazenly? And in fact, let's go a step further. Do you see them employing terroristic tactics?
They've been employing terrorist tactics for years. This is nothing new. Kidnappings of Americans is nothing new. Kidnappings, extortions, torture, these things go back decades to the Mexican cartels. So I don't mean to be gratuitous, it's just not covered in Mexico. And the reason it's not, being a journalist is not a good position to be in Mexico, writing about cartel violence, plain and simple. They'll target it. I don't care if it's a blogger or a professional journalist or a judge or a police officer. No one's exempt from the cartels and their level of brutality.
All 3 of you are law enforcement professionals, military experience. If you see an enemy use a tactic, technique, or procedure that threatens the lives of those that you're in command of or civilian populations, do you disseminate that information?
Certainly.
So if it's been alleged that there was an IED that was used by the cartels across the border, would that be something that our Border Patrol agents would want to know?
Absolutely. I know as a Border Patrol agent, I'd like to know something like that was happening, regardless of where it is on the border. I think it needs to go out to across all agents, all stations, that be on the lookout for something like this, because it could mean your life.
Absolutely. I assume the same for the Sheriff's Department and for DPS throughout the state of Texas.
Certainly.
Yeah. Colonel, can you talk to the expense that the state of Texas has had to endure because of the abdication of responsibility of the federal government? I'm talking all the expense, from the hospitals to the jails, the Operation Lone Star and Stone Garden.
Just in the last couple of years, it's billions of dollars, but there's even more cost, because every time we get a surge like this, and where we take troopers, we take special agents, Texas Rangers, and we take resources from other parts of the state, as sheriffs know from those locations, and we send them down to the borders to be able to do intensified operations. And that takes away a public safety value in those areas. So it becomes more safe here, supporting our Border Patrol partners, less safe there. So there's an impact in terms of statewide, and we recognize that. And certainly the governor recognizes that, and the state legislature has recognized that. But the governor's made it very clear to me is that at the end of the day, is that a secured international border with Mexico is an absolute imperative. And without that, we don't have public safety and our homeland security in Texas.
I thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your testimony and your service. With that, Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields. I now recognize the gentlelady from Georgia, Mrs. Green.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here today and engaging in this important discussion with us. It's a necessary discussion, and again, we are outraged and angered that our Democrat colleagues didn't see the importance of our national security and our border security, even to be important enough for them to get on an airplane and come down here and be here for this hearing. Shame on them. Shame on them for not coming and listening to you and engaging in this important discussion about how to protect our country and protect our border. During Trump's administration, the entire administration, there were approximately 2,437,856 alien encounters in that 4 years. During the Biden administration, to date, which is just over 2 years, there have been 4.7 million alien encounters just in his time as president. That is double. It has doubled in just that short amount of time. Now, under the Trump administration, there were 581,257 gotaways during 4 years. During the Biden administration, to date, it is 1.3 million gotaways. This is an incredible increase, and it is not by mistake or accident. In your opinion, each of you, what are the policy changes that have happened to contribute to this invasion of our country? Mr. Cabrera.
I think first you have the parole. We're paroling people into the United States instead of mandatory detention, mandatory removal. The talk of ending remain in Mexico and then putting it right back on a couple of days later, that had some issues. Before we could send everybody back, and after Biden restarted it, we could only send certain folks back. I think those are the two biggest ones. If we continue to let people come in, they're going to continue to come in. It's just like with a kid. If you let them do certain things and you tell them no, but there's no consequence to it, they're going to continue to test those limits, and that's what we're seeing. We can tell them all day long that if you come, we'll send you back. But once we release them into the country, they call home, they put it on Facebook or Instagram or whatever they use, and more people come because regardless of what I say or the commissioner or whoever, their brother, their sister, their cousin told them how to do and how to do it and how it's done, and so they do it.
Open door policies. Sheriff Coe.
Well, I agree 100%. Because of the lack of consequences, they just continue on. That's why we started prosecuting for criminal trespass, and we've seen it effective because we're pushing the foot traffic into another county. We're still catching them, but not as many, but we're pushing them to another county. I hate to do that, but that's the only way I can protect my county. So there has to be consequences.
That's right. Colonel McCraw.
Agreed with Agent Cabrera.
Thank you. It is my opinion, and I have co-sponsored legislation to impeach Secretary Mayorkas for his failure as Secretary of Homeland Security to do his job to protect our country, and in not doing his job to enforce policies or bring policies under the Biden administration that allow our good men and women of the Border Patrol and ICE to do their jobs. And I think that's something that should be done, definitely. But I'd like to talk to you for a second, Mr. Cabrera, because you said something that struck me, and I want to acknowledge this. You stated in your opening testimony that you told your wife that you didn't take this job for the money, because your job, you don't get paid a lot of money. Border Patrol agents don't get paid a lot of money. As a matter of fact, men and women in all law enforcement don't get paid a lot of money, but you do such an important job, and I thank you for that, and you're the right man for the job. So I just wanted to say that to you. But also, I looked it up while the discussion was going on. Secretary Mayorkas makes $200,000 a year in his job while he's failing to do his job. And I'm a business owner, and that's what I did all my life before I became a member of Congress. And I believe in accountability as well, and that's what you gentlemen just spoke of, is accountability. And I believe in accountability to people that are getting paid to do a job. And Secretary Mayorkas certainly should not get paid the big salary that he gets to put men and women in the Border Patrol, their lives in danger like they are every single day. In the hearing before this one, or actually this morning, it was revealed to us that an explosive device was found by Border Patrol on January 17th, but it didn't seem to be reported to very high levels. And I was just wondering, had you heard about an explosive device being found in January?
Absolutely not. Actually, the first I learned of it was this morning, watching the live stream in the room down the hall.
Right, and so that, to me, that's the cartels taking it to a whole different level that puts our Border Patrol men and women in extreme danger. And you mentioned, how many suicides did you say there were among Border Patrol agents?
17.
Out of 18,000?
16,000.
Okay.
Well, 19,500, including
19
supervisors and management.
Out of 19,500, there were 17 suicides. And you said there were how many suicide under New York?
30 out of 35,000 officers, 4.
Four. That shows the tremendous difference in stress and emotional toll on Border Patrol agents with a much higher suicide rate, and that again is devastating. Is there, what do you see could be done for Border Patrol agents to make their jobs easier, less frustrating, and for them to be able to accomplish what they need to do on a daily basis?
So if you could answer as quickly as possible, I appreciate that.
We just need to get out there, let us do our jobs the way we were trained to do it, enforce the laws as they were written, and let the law supersede the policy as opposed to the policy superseding the law.
Thank you.
Well said by a paratrooper. All right. The gentlelady yields, and I recognize Mr. LaLota from New York.
Thank you, Chairman. Gentlemen, thanks for being here, for what you're doing for our great country. I represent a suburban district in New York. I'm about an hour or two east of Manhattan. I'm the Yankee in the crowd and appreciate your hospitality. I think I've traveled the furthest of any member in the committee here. This issue is important to my constituents. It's important to me because New York is indeed a border state. We are a border state because of the sanctuary city policies that come from my state. We are a border state because of President Biden and Secretary Mayorkas' failed leadership, and we are a border state because of the lack of infrastructure, technology, and personnel at the border. And my first line of questioning is going to go to the folks from the state and local, the director and the sheriff. You folks are stepping up and are leading where the federal government is not. This should be a federal issue. The federal government has a responsibility to secure our border. And in absence of that, I commend you and I thank you on behalf of my constituents for stepping up. We've had tons of fentanyl deaths in our county, about 400 recently. We have crime. We have overcrowding in our schools. We have legitimate people looking to go through the immigration process, and folks have cut that line. But your leadership, gentlemen, has helped thwart some of that. So my question is, as a follow-on to Mr. Pfluger's question, what is the cost of you stepping up in the federal government's absence in terms of dollars? What have you had to spend, first you, Director, and then Sheriff afterwards, what have you had to spend to fill those leadership shoes?
Well, just in the last 2 years, the state's spent over $4 billion. And they're looking at spending another $4 billion in the next biennium, and they're having to find revenue to be able to do that. So they're not planning on it being the problem immediately going away and dissipating. And frankly, if we would love to see, and by the way, 23,000, and we're talking about Border Patrol agents, you're down to 19,000. And then you talk about New York City, one police department's got more officers than the entire U.S. Border Patrol. And they've got 2 I mean, it's pitiful in terms of the underinvestment the federal government's made in Border Patrol over the years and border defenses. That's my one comment. I'll keep my other comments to myself.
And many of my constituents don't know this. My understanding is of Texas' 200 and something counties. Many of the counties deploy their officers, their deputies to the border to help secure the border, sir? 254,
and they certainly would, but they're usually back at home trying to take care of the gaps that we leave when we send troopers down south. But there's not a one that doesn't have to deal with border-related problems in their jurisdiction already.
Thank you. Sheriff, on the cost in terms of dollars to your agency, sir?
On my cost, my current budget's just a little over $1 million. That's to cover everything. We're 6 months into it, and I've already expended all my fuel money. So we've got to borrow from somebody else or take it from another department because of issues like that. The cost of EMS having to transport people to and from a local hospital, which we don't have. We got to go 40 miles to go to a hospital. About 20% of what we're transporting to hospitals is the result of illegal immigration. Aliens that have succumbed to the heat or have some type of broken leg, broken arm, been snake bit out in the brush, we have to transport them. We don't get reimbursed. So our EMS crew and my office are going to be in the red again this year because of this.
Safe to say, Sheriff and Director, you would agree that the federal government should reimburse you for those costs?
They should have been reimbursing us a long time ago because the federal government won't pay for our transport to and from.
I'm not sure that Stafford Act covers policy disasters, but clearly it is a disaster and certainly a crisis.
I agree with that. Moving on to opportunity cost, you're diverting resources, personnel, equipment, and otherwise to cover the federal government's back where the federal government has failed. How would you address where you're having to miss the ball back at home in terms of crimes against people, crimes against property? What are you missing because you have to divert your resources to a federal government problem?
Well, on the county level, part of my job is, yes, to help get cats out of the trees, hang out with the kids at school, teach the kids to respect law enforcement, be an example. But because of this illegal immigration, my resources are going elsewhere. Yes, we still handle some of the domestic stuff, the big stuff, but being in the public eye, what we're supposed to be, we're out doing Border Patrol's job. No offense to the Border Patrol because they're being tied up doing other things. My crew I've got 6 full-time deputies, and we spend the majority of our day processing smugglers and illegal immigrants because the Border Patrol can't. So we're missing out on a lot when things we should be doing that we can't.
We have to conduct surge operations, sustain deployments around the state from resources elsewhere in the state, and continue to move wave after wave after wave to be able to keep intensified patrol operations, on the river, certainly in the air and on the ground and the brush streams.
Let me close by once again saying thank you. It's a sacrifice that you and your officers and deputies are making personally, financially, and us New Yorkers, we do appreciate it.